The global warming fanatics used to get terribly upset when you described their antics as akin to those of religious zealots. But now a Time magazine article is reporting on the case for making Earth Day a religious holiday. Greenies may claim to be driven by science and facts, but the reality is environmentalism is far closer in form to religion. Joining me to inject some sanity into the debate is author and energy expert Alex Epstein. Alex, is this how you see it? Is climate hysteria akin to religious zealotry?
I'm glad that they're catching up and admitting it, because I've been frustrated for a long time that they have this primitive anti-human religion, but that they have the stamp of science on it, which makes it even worse because people just take it on faith. And one of these ideas is what I call sometimes the perfect planet premise, which is the idea that nature, absent us, is this perfect thing, and that all we can do is ruin it. And this has no basis in science or no basis in humanism. I mean, from a human perspective, the Earth is not a very good place to live until we industrialize it, until we use a lot of energy and machines to make the world a productive and prosperous place. But yet people have this idea that it's this delicate nurture or perfect planet, and anything we do is going to ruin it. And that's behind a lot of the fear that people have had for over 50 years, whether it's a climate catastrophe, pollution catastrophe, resource depletion catastrophe. It's always, we're going to ruin the perfect Earth with evil humans. So it really is, it's viewing like unimpacted nature as this God, and then we're going to anger the God, and the God is going to punish us. So it has a very religious hell narrative to it.
And it has also so much ignorance built around it, because if you know anything about the history of the world, the millions of years of history, you would know about the mass extinction events, the fact that you don't need humans around to have devastating impact on the Earth. And what humans have been able to do, like you've said, is make the Earth habitable for us and to have a standard of living that sadly I think we're not going to have if we continue down this green path to lunacy. And on that, there's also all sorts of psychological impacts. Kamala Harris has again talked about the mental toll that climate change is taking on young people. She talks about climate anxiety here.
Last time I was here, I was at the Aspen Institute, and I know there's some people here who were part of organizing that, where with Gloria Stefan we talked about what is happening in this region and what's happening in our country and in the world on this issue. And there were young leaders there who I met with before I went on stage, and I said, tell me how you're talking with your peers. How are you experiencing this issue? And they hipped me to something and a phrase that I had not heard before. They said, they talked about climate anxiety. Climate anxiety. The emotional, the psychological, the mental toll that the knowledge about this crisis is taking on our young people.
Alex, there's probably never been a better time to be a human being on this earth. There's never been a safer time to be a human being. And yet we've got people growing up in privilege, growing up in Western countries, having climate anxiety, having mental health issues because of their fears about climate change.
Well, and notice that she's endorsing it. Like, she's affirming it. She's not saying, hey, there's something irrational here. Like, when people had anxiety about the Mayan apocalypse in 2012, they were probably told by their mental health professionals, this isn't going to happen. Well, they should say the same thing about the climate apocalypse, because it's not happening at all. We're safer than ever from climate. Climate change doesn't mean climate catastrophe, let alone apocalypse. I can't resist an aesthetic comment on Harris, because she has this thing where every time she's so happy that she can even think of the next sentence. She's like a 2-year-old who's learning how to speak. She's so satisfied if she can just think of one sentence that is not going to embarrass her, except in this case, all those sentences should embarrass her, because she's actually affirming what is causing people suffering. And so that is really shameful and embarrassing.
Oh, it is. And her administration and her and Joe Biden's administration are adding to that anxiety. And Joe Biden just recently made some comments that I thought were interesting as well about the nation's children.
Rebecca put a teacher's creed into words when she said There's no such thing as someone else's child. No such thing as someone else's child. Our nation's children are all our children.
Interesting. There's a child in Arkansas that the Biden family refuses to acknowledge. That's someone's child. But what do you think about this rather Marxist notion that the nation owns the children? And how do you think that feeds into this climate change agenda?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the idea that the state owns your life. I mean, they're putting it in a seemingly nice way. Hey, I'm going to take care of your kid. But what that really means is that they have the right to take away your money and your resources and then to control your kid, including, in my view, to miseducate them about this kind of thing. So, what they've done in regard to environmental science, in regard to energy misinformation, I would regard as child abuse. And it's causing eco-anxieties. We can see it's also causing terrible policies. And yet they're saying, oh, we're taking care of you. Like, we're going to have kids soon in my family, and I don't want them anywhere near. I don't want Joe Biden anywhere near my kids.
Same here. Now, just lastly, I want to ask you about the policies we're seeing here in Australia. The Australian government is pushing ahead with this electric vehicle obsession. The population is largely disinterested. Despite the hype, EV sales are a tiny number, and yet the Labor government is launching a new strategy to limit fuel emissions on new cars. We've seen just millions, billions of dollars pumped into EVs, all sorts of taxpayers' subsidies. And yet, Alex, if they were actually successful in getting more of us into EVs, what would be the impact on the grid, for example?
There's so much wrong with this, and this is happening in the U.S. right now. So Biden just announced in the U.S. these kind of emissions regulations, but they're intended to be EV mandates. And basically, despite the fact that they're stealing all our money to subsidize people's EVs, that hasn't worked well enough in their view. So now they need to force it by making these emissions mandates, which are just designed to get huge percentages of EVs. And I heard somebody had the gall in the Australian story to say, oh, we're saving you money. Oh, thank you so much for saving me money by forcing me to do something that I don't want to do. I think it's pretty easy for me to calculate how cost effective a car is. And so part of it is people aren't buying EVs in mass because of the costs. But then there's also, as you indicated, the grid issues. We are radically increasing the demand for reliable electricity and radically decreasing the supply, both in Australia and in the US. So I've used this before, but Gavin Newsom, where I live in California, he declared an end to the internal combustion engine, and 5 days later said, don't charge your EVs or run your air conditioners for that matter, because it's too hot and we didn't produce enough electricity. So it's really shameful. I have an in-depth story if people are interested at my website, alexepstein.substack.com. I just have a Substack there that goes into this. Australia and America just seem to want to make all the mistakes of Europe and actually double down on them.
Alex Epstein, always a pleasure to get your insights. Thank you so much for joining me today.